Hey. So, I'm sticking to more peaceful spots, I think, here. Here it'll be very calm. I was up here yesterday as well, just taking some time to myself to rest and stretch and climb the trees a bit. It's nice. I like being here. I like being in the forest. Here is a bit nearer the motorway and the train tracks than would be my ideal. But that's a trade-off for living in a city, which comes with a lot of advantages. Basically, I like to. Well, I don't have a car, and I like to do as much as possible without using a car. And in the right spot, in the countryside, that is possible. But the city makes it much more straightforward. You can do it in a few minutes from the metro. And still be a few minutes from the forest, so yeah, I'll put up with some background rumbling for that. Yeah, last time I went higher up the hill. There are roads all through the forest, so there's not really a spot where there won't be some car noise, but I thought maybe going up there would be a bit quieter, but when it was not peaceful at all. It was nice. Yeah. But of course it depends on the day. That was a very windy day. And it was interesting looking back over the video and seeing how incoherent I was, because that's not always the case. And I had coherent ideas I was trying to get across, but between brain and mouth, it was just getting a bit scrambled. That happens sometimes when I'm more tired. It would actually be really interesting to do this if I had a completely different everything else in my life, to do this every day, to have a day-to-day record of how my alertness, fatigue level, and ability to string together coherent sentences varies over time. But right now I'm just doing every couple of weeks, and it's probably clear at this point that I don't know what anyone was expecting from this, but this is not a Michael nerds out about game design constantly channel. And I will do that at times. But yeah, if you funded my Patreon expecting a game design talk every couple of weeks, then I'm sorry, and please unsubscribe if you mind that. the games of my own that I could talk about, apart from what I'm currently working on, which, as I've tried to be clear, isn't much. Hopefully, hopefully soon it will be more, because I was scribbling some notes last week for an idea that I'd had a few years ago, which came back to me, and I think it's quite promising. So maybe I'll get into that soon, and there'll be more to talk about current stuff. But apart from that, there's just this prototype, which I'll put out in a simple form, hopefully this year. And yeah, my released games are quite a long time ago now, and I've already, for most of them, written a lot of words about them on my blog. And yeah, I might some week do a retrospective about this or whatever, but it's not mainly where I'm at. But I've been playing Dicey Dungeons by Terry Kavanagh, and I like it. It's really nice, actually, for a change, to play a game that's been really well tuned to be a fairly easy difficulty level. Apart from the Witch, which it's clearly marked as the hardest, so that's fair. But yeah, for the most part, you can just play the game and you'll get to the end. And there are various options for different builds you might take, and they all work well enough. And that's just kind of nice, actually, as opposed to stricter games where you really have to figure out which things work, which things you obviously wouldn't pick. Just any pick is fine. I mean, you have to make sure you do have some way of dealing damage, but you will. If you think things probably go together, they probably go together. It's probably a combo. Yeah, it's refreshing, and not what I want all the time, of course, but it's been a nice thing to just play through and relax a bit with in this tired, busy time. Oh, I guess I'm talking about Dicey Dungeons now. I had other plans, but I've spent enough minutes talking about Dicey Dungeons, so let's have a little chat about Dicey Dungeons. So this is one of the ideas I had for what I might do here. Talk about, rather than going over my games again, talk about games by other people that I like and what I like about them. And there's a nice trick that it pulls narratively, which I don't think it's fooling anyone, but it's still effective. The story of the game makes a lot of emphasis on how hard it is, how punishing these dungeons are. There's a villain who's just so nasty and cruel and put you in these awful, sparing dungeons, and it's sort of a nice sleight of hand to distract from that actually your hand is being held in a very generous way, and the dungeons are actually quite fair. Game's constantly telling you that it's unfair, but actually it's more than fair, it's generous. So it's cute. I like it. I like the dice as a mechanism for not every turn being repeating the same program. Yeah, most of these. Do they have a genre name? These Slay the Spire and so Dicey is kind of a dueling game because you're facing off one by one against individual opponents. But Slay the Spire has groups. I guess I'd call it a JRPG-like, because it's a series of combat encounters with like little reduced bits of story and shop crafting kind of things in between. I promise not to get into the definition of roguelike discussion here, but it is a bit confusing for me to see sometimes people referring to these games as roguelikes. But I think that's the last time I'll mention that on this channel, because it's just so dumb. Okay, Dicey. So I didn't finish my sentence. Yeah, most of these games are using cards to have a different set of abilities available to you each turn, and Dicey is having the same set of abilities for the most part, but the resources which you input to those abilities being randomised from the dice, and that's a nice little variation. It reminded me a little of Roll for the Galaxy, which is a dice variation on Race for the Galaxy, which is a beautiful card game, and I will probably talk a lot about at some point. So Race has the central choice of the game is an action selection from 5 different phases, and the dice version of the game takes that drastically reduces what you can choose based on your roll each turn. So I haven't played it enough to really have a full handle on how it manages to work, despite so much of that being taken away. but it kind of seems to. Yeah, so in race, you would choose, like, the actions apply to all players, so you try and choose an action which benefits you the most and everyone else the least. But then there's some mind games going on, because if someone can predict your action, then they can often make a plan that will benefit from that action. So if one action is obviously the best for you, then it's obvious to everyone else that you will take that action, and so you shouldn't take that action. That's, the classic Yomi if something is too strong for you, then it's countered, so you pick something weaker for you, so people expect you to pick something weaker for you, so then you can go back to picking something stronger for you, and cycles around, and you try and figure out at what level of thinking everyone else is doing. And then roll takes that away, because you want to choose the action that's strongest for you, but you might not have even rolled the right dice for that action, and so maybe your best choice right now is something that's worse for you, which the other player assumes you won't do because it's not what's best for you, but then they assume you will do that because they would predict that you would do what's best for you, and then you would do that instead. So they might predict what you're going to do, so then you might do something that's even worse for you out of your available options that you have to. So obviously Dicey as a single player game doesn't have any of the mind games, but it has the variation that, okay, I've got a big sword that does lots of damage on a 6, didn't roll a 6 this turn, can't use it, how do I make the best of what I did roll? And yeah, I really like when a game puts you in a position of making the best of suboptimal resources. Optimization puzzles, lose their appeal pretty quickly. That you figure out what's the best route and you take it, and then after a while you have good heuristics for working out the best route. You can mostly just see it right away and you take it, and then the game's finished in your mind, if not in the machine. Constantly having to even though often the solutions are still obvious given the constraints, just constantly randomizing the constraints gives a nice texture to it. I really like just the little bits of character it has throughout, and sometimes the opponents will say something when you start a battle or where you end the battle, with high frequency at first but diminishing over time as you've seen them a lot, but just often enough to keep reminding you that they do have personalities and keep it feeling alive. And yeah, aside from this villain emphasizing how nasty the dungeon is, there's a lot of the opponents you fight are actually quite friendly, and it's really, there's no death in the game, which is just like kind of nice and cheerful. Like a game about having a series of combat encounters with fantasy weapons doesn't have to be a game about killing, and that's emphasised by sometimes like you win a fight, you've reduced the enemy's hit points to 0, and then they say, "Oh, congratulations, you did really well there. That was really clever," and just like these little touches just make it nice. It's a nice game. You could have the same mechanics, and in the fight with this shot of them bleeding out, "Oh, you have slain me," and it would just be like generic fantasy bar, and like I mean, it's nice in contrast. Like, if every game I played was emphasising how cheerful and happy it is, and everyone pops back up and says congratulations when you kill them or beat them, then it wouldn't be notable that a game's doing this. But it's just fun. Something I really like in it is that the healing and shield abilities are really worthwhile. A lot of games I tend to undervalue healing abilities, or I under-prioritize healing abilities because they turn out to not be very good. Because, like, suppose a fight goes for N rounds, if you have a healing ability, use that so many times. If you had a ability that did more damage instead, you would do damage at a higher rate, end the battle more quickly, take less damage, and it often seems to turn out that the amount less you take by having the battle going on for fewer rounds is less than the amount that you recover with healing abilities by having more rounds, by having spent resources on the healing ability rather than the damage ability. And in Dicey, that's not the case. The healing abilities genuinely are critical if you try to play without them and disregard them on the assumption that they're likely to be suboptimal. You'll have actually a hard time winning. Yeah, at least the later challenges. And at the same time, they're not so strong that you can... So this is the reason why they're usually weak in games, is because if you make them strong, you end up with builds that can constantly heal more than the enemy is outputting in damage, and just like play out a script that doesn't have any risk or fun in it, until you're against an opponent who's also doing that, and the fight goes on forever. So Dicey avoids having fights that go on forever, and avoids healing being underpowered. So it's just like, it's a really, really fine spot in the middle there, and like, well done for hitting that. It's just really a well-tuned game, and deliberately tuned. Like I said, it's tuned to be a low difficulty, but it's really precisely targeted at the difficulty that it's at. It's like, obviously he's chosen that as the goal and used a lot of design to get it there. I might talk about Rift Wizard, obviously not today, I'm running out of time from my computer suddenly running out of memory and stuff in the video, which I hope hasn't happened already. Let's just lock me out. Still recording, good. Yeah, Rift Wizard has some high level enemies that heal themselves, heal each other, and really strongly, and that has this frustrating thing of you keep dealing out damage and they keep healing up faster you can deal it, and the fight goes on forever. But it works in a different way. It's one of the tactical situations you have to prepare your build to deal with, or carefully choose which realms to go into to avoid, is the situation of enemies healing faster than you can damage them. And one option is to take a spell that deals unhealable damage. Fine, just counter it. Other options are like positioning spells to separate the enemies that are healing each other so that you can take them down one by one. There are various other build options that can face the scenario, but you have to be prepared for that situation, and the player doesn't have that option. The player's healing is much more limited, very limited actually. It's quite, yes. Okay, I'm gonna say goodbye and not talk anymore about Rift Wizard and save that for another week, because it's pretty nice. And thanks for listening, thanks for supporting me. I just had a baby last week and I do not have time to talk about that, so another time. But yeah, it's been a busy time. I'm not sure when I will be really get down to actually programming work or design work for a bit, but it's really good. Okay, goodbye.